Morning all. I had my first game of the season last night, playing for Muswell Hill in the Middlesex League. My opponent was ECF 186, but a D rating, so that's not too many games, but about a few years ago it was about 160, 170. So Kelmendi for Hammersmith Chess Club, and we're at home at Muswell Hill. I played knight f3. He was a bit late actually. He was about 40 minutes late, so it was only like an hour and a half for 30 moves. Oh, sorry, an hour and a quarter for 30 moves. Quite a tight time trial anyway. And but anyway, I tried to just take my time and not factor in the clock. It's too easy sometimes to sort of play quickly yourself if you think you've got a big time advantage. You just got to use the time. I actually let him catch up on the clock later. I just tried to find the best moves I could. So eventually he just played this G6. He came and played G6, so C4. So we've got kind of English opening emerging from the original Reti move, that knight f3. And I've had good success actually with knight f3 and c4. It seems to confuse opponents just ever so slightly in the opening, this move order. So b6, and it's like the opponent's like making it up, I thought at the time, especially now because there's a king's Indian feature here, the fianchetto bishop, and he's combining it with a queen's fianchetto, which I'm not sure is that great, especially in this continuation. I now play e4, so I've got a kind of king's Indian, big centre of pawns, and he further weakens his dark squares. He plays e6. And I really just thought this was a bit odd. I mean, I know black might be preparing d5, but if I keep this bishop closed, that bishop's not going to be that great. If I don't, open its scope up. So I played bishop g5, playing it like a sort of Averbach, system against the king's Indian with bishop g5 and queen d2 now. So he castles, and I crudely, play bishop h6. Try and weaken the dark squares a bit. I know it's crude, but it's often effective, and I haven't castled yet. And perhaps the instructive thing about this game is not needing to castle sometimes. It shows, sometimes you can just go for the opponent's king and keep your rooks active. So here, after d5, I just take on g7, so I've softened up my opponent's king. And I just want to keep this bishop locked out, so I take on d5, and now play e5. And I did look at this game with Rybka before this, but I'm not going to, put Rybka now. I don't want to be its slave. But it did seem to think White was already, better here. He has got the undermining move c5, but I don't need to take on c5. That would be bad. Giving him, dangerous pawns with d4. I can keep this bishop shut out for the moment. So I actually play h4, another very crude move. And also making it trickier, for me to castle kingside later. Otherwise, what would be the point of extending the scope of the rook? Have a look at both my rooks though, and how they're used. So I haven't castled yet. So c takes d4. Now instead of playing like knight takes d4, I thought he's just got knight c6, because then he'd be attacking d4 and e5. And if queen d4, knight c6. So knight b5. And this kind of reminds me of that variation in the French that Timon used to play with bishop d2 in the winnower, where you play knight b5 to either take on d4 or go to d6. But here d6 has got extra, venom to it, because it would be attacking b7 from d6. So he plays bishop c8, and here, I was pleasantly surprised, because I thought actually, he's going to play h5, but maybe h5 isn't that brilliant either. It's creating more weaknesses. It makes f6 trickier for black. It's weakening g5 in particular. So anyway, his choice though, after h5, my rook's really kind of active on the h file, and he plays a passive move, knight g8, to make sure I don't mate him on h6. And I'm thinking, do I really want to castle queenside even? Because rook c1, instead of castling queenside, immediately gives me, the threat of knight c7 to trap his rook, to win his rook. And if he has to play knight a6, I thought that's still, a bit awkward. So I played rook c1, so I'm committing myself really not to castle in this game. But you know, look at all his pieces; they're all just on the back row here. I play knight after knight a6. I play knight to d6. I did see some fascinating variations here. Actually, when I did check with Rivka, basically involving like HGs, and HGs and knight g5s is very dangerous for black in many variations. So the way I played it may not have been the most accurate, but it seemed to be you know, quite good anyway. So knight d6, and he plays knight c5. So maybe the idea of knight e4. I play queen takes d4, and his bishop goes to e6. And it's here during the game I actually thought, hold on, I had a knight like this last season in the Muswell Hill match and it didn't do anything. It was later undermined. And is the same thing going to happen here with f6? So I wasn't actually, at this point in the game, during the game, I wasn't actually convinced that I had, you know, a reasonably good position. I thought I'd lost the advantage actually. But then I thought, hold on. There's something about this position which actually is positive. You know, this h file is dangerous because there's a positional aspect that if I really want to stop black playing f6, then hg is useful. Because if he plays fg, obviously there's no f6. Although I'm giving him like pressure on the f file, without f6, how can he undermine, you know, e5 and d6? So what I did first was just take on g6. So it was sort of positional actually, not just, you know, h file attack. And now he took with the f pawn, so there's no concern about f6. So this is more secure, the knight on d6. But I really wondered, you know, how is it actually, you know, useful here? Well, I found that there's another neat move here that perhaps, you know, justifies now the knight and the pawn. So I wanted to attack on the dark squares, and although it's defended by the knight, I'll play queen e3 anyway, because there's another subtle point here. The square d4 is vacated now for knight d4, and then I'll be threatening rook c5 and knight e6. So knight d4 is quite a powerful knight, and he spends another move just, you know, trying to defend his king a bit, so h6. So I play this knight d4, and my knights are starting to look good. I'm starting to be more encouraged now that I've got some concrete threats.